All right. Hello, everybody. Today I am doing something slightly different than Flat Earth. I've decided that I needed to have a conversation about politics. So with me to talk about politics is Maxwell Horne. You can find his channel in the video description and go check him out. He's got some really great content about just a lot of stuff, not necessarily politics. I know we will probably be doing politics a lot, but he's got videos on other things besides politics, some really great stuff. So, go subscribe to him and stuff.
Yeah.
So Max, so one of the reasons that I wanted to have this conversation and one of the reasons I asked you to do this is that I find that in the skeptic community that I'm part of, a lot of us are very skeptical of a lot of ideas. We sit around and talk about flat Earth. We sit around and talk about anti-vaxxers. We sit around and talk about climate change. No problem whatsoever talking about these things. If any of my subscribers, you know that I'm always on Earth debates and I'm always talking to flat earthers. And we have absolutely no problem having our viewpoints challenged when it comes to things that are, should I say, more scientifically oriented. We really don't have a problem with that. But the moment that politics comes up, everybody puts up a wall and refuses to talk about politics. Mm-hmm. Politics is the one area that I find a lot of skeptics refuse to be skeptical. And I have met some skeptics that will go full conspiracy theory on politics. Hillary Clinton pays people to protest at things and then provides no evidence for such claim. And it forgets, and at this point starts to just forget the very basics of the scientific method and skepticism. So I brought on Max because he's a little bit more scientifically minded. So I think we're gonna at least be able to talk on that level, on the sort of the scientific, more skeptic level, and be able to talk politics in more of that manner.
Yeah.
And then the other reason that I wanted to bring Max out on here is because he recently, maybe it's not that recent, I don't remember how old your video is. You're gonna have to correct me here. I think it was like 2 weeks ago. You made a video about the Muslim ban.
That was about 5 days ago, I think.
5 days ago.
It wasn't really about the Muslim ban. It was about Mike's interpretation of why the Muslim ban, but not really the Muslim ban. They were trying to kind of make 2 points at the same time. The point that like the Muslim ban is illegitimate because those countries aren't a problem, and then like Muslims as a whole in the United States, which their message was kind of blurry when I was going through. I was like, which one are you trying to make? Because they're two very separate points. One could be conceded while the other one is still not conceded. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And so when I watched this video, at the end of it, I was left, how to put this? I was left dazed and confused about it. And so I left a message to Max and I was like, come fight me, bro. And so here we are. But it's actually not a come fight me. The thing that ended up happening was, I wouldn't call myself strongly in Mike's camp, but I had agreed with them. And I've seen this video before on the Facebooks and whatnots. Mm-hmm. So I'd seen this video before and I was like, oh, makes sense. And I didn't really think about it too much. They showed numbers and whatnot. So I was like, all right, perfect. And then Max went through it all and kind of debunked it for me. And so I was sitting there realizing that I had failed to be skeptical about something in politics, and the thing that I just said that I complain about other skeptics doing, I was doing myself. I was not being skeptical. I had just I had bought it because I am personally, just to throw my opinion out there, I don't like the Muslim ban. I think it's stupid and all that nonsense. So I had kind of bought into it, and I never thought about it skeptically until I saw Max's video, and then it finally hit me. I am being just as biased as the people that I'm complaining about not being skeptical about politics. So you sort of opened that door for me, Max, which is why I wanted to bring you.
I'm honored. I'm honored to have been able to.
So we can start with the Muslim ban,
Sure.
which you brought up some really great points about it, which was mostly just confusion about what things were being, and correct me if I'm wrong, what kind of data points were being used and how they were being used. So I'll let you explain your video.
So when they were making, I would have to find the exact wording, but I think they were trying to make the case that white people, white men specifically in America, are more dangerous on a per capita basis. They didn't say this, but on a per capita basis, it's implied, than Muslims in America. And they use a lot of really specific wording in order to make that, in order to skew data to make what they're claiming not false, but misleading. Like, for instance, I'd have to look it up. Basically, what they said was that Muslim refugees from the banned countries are, for instance, responsible for 0 terrorist attacks on U.S. soil. And that's a lot of very specifics to tailor a statement to make it true. And then people are going to take from that, oh, that means that Muslims are not as dangerous as, and then they compare it to just white men in general.
Yeah. So they were technically not wrong. Like they
were technically not lying, but they knew what they were doing.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So what they were essentially doing was comparing confirmed terrorist attacks, which we have to use the definition of terrorist attacks, which isn't as most people would believe it to be. A lot of what we commonly will talk about amongst our peers as, oh, that was a terrorist attack that happened, will not get reported as an official terrorist attack because the motive was either unknown or it was unconfirmable. And I haven't actually done enough research to know the specifics of, for instance, why the Minnesota stabbing wasn't considered a terrorist attack when the guy was asking, "Are you Muslim or not?" right before stabbing people. It seems like it's pretty obvious that would be known as the motive is some form of religious zealotry in the vein of Islam. But it seems like they're really cautious to give terrorist attack the label. And then a lot of things just get reported as like violent crimes in general in that way, or homicide.
Yeah. So what ended up being is that Mike was comparing terrorist attack to just violent crimes done by white people.
Yeah, against property, against people, and just violent, not just hate crimes, not just terrorist attacks. But yeah. And I looked into the data more, and they were citing like white supremacists. They were saying far right, and they were claiming, white supremacists, white nationalists, and neo-Nazi groups are that demographic. Which there's an argument to be made about whether it's fair to call that far right or not. I mean, some people would consider me to be far right, even though I'm just like a moderately, if not mildly, right-wing leaning person myself. It'd be akin to saying, "Oh, Stalin, this far left guy," right?
Yeah. So that was an interesting conversation, and I still, while I don't agree with the tactics that Mike used at all, they're very particular set of language. And I still have to I did a little bit of research, and I sort of looked up all the technically terrorist attacks that have occurred on U.S. soil. Mm-hmm. And just from looking at them by, that definition, that very strict definition, terrorist attacks that are technically considered terrorist attacks done on U.S. soil by that very strict definition, it still seemed like at least none of them had been committed by the people who would have been encompassed by the tribal ban. So to me, it seems like if the tribal ban had been enacted in 2001 and had continued till present, it would not have actually prevented any of the attacks that occurred.
Well, I mean, and the majority of I remember looking into this, and this might also not be true, but it sounds like the majority of what we would consider terrorist attacks by Islam extremists in this country are happening by second generation Muslims in this country. Mm-hmm. They're people that left the faith or had like really light faith, and then they had this sort of realization that they're starting to wander away from what the faith tells them they should be doing with their lives, and as a result, they feel like Western civilization or Western culture has duped them into delineating from the Muslim agenda, and as a result, they want to seek revenge on that. Have you noticed that at all?
I noticed that a lot of it was either, yeah, it was like second generation immigrants or native born U.S. citizens whose parents were
Yeah,
immigrants.
who became moderate Muslims, like this sort of, in the sense that almost all Christians are like moderate Christians. No one's saying that you need to go marry your rapist if you get raped or something in the Christian faith anymore. At least I hope not. But yeah, a lot of them. It seems like a lot of them, like the San Bernardino, I think, for example, was some people who essentially felt like they'd been duped by Western civilization like that, and they felt they needed to lash out against it because it's such a distraction from the agenda that they feel that they're supposed to push, they're supposed to follow by their dogma.
Mm-hmm. So how do you feel then? Because I think this is one part that we both agree on. When it came specifically to the Mike video, it talked about the person they were comparing, or the group that they were comparing to, was white men, which I hate to be all conspiratorial about this, but it's to me at least, it seems very much so true that there is, and I don't want to call it a war, but there's a huge attack on the media on white men, like, all the time.
And I would say it's only happened in about the past 5 years. It's become very popular to be like, oh, all women and all minorities have it really rough and white men have it so easy, and like just to paint with a very, very broad brush like that. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so that part I really don't agree with Mike about, just painting all white men as the villain in their narrative. But I do understand that there are white supremacist groups. There are. It's almost that thing that liberals say, where it's like, they're the extremists, and then there's the moderate.
Right.
And then
it's like one of those things. There. It's like one of those things where you have to think about, like, how, for instance, they brought up like 64% of mass shootings are done by white men. Okay, that's fine. But like, what if they were to bring up the fact that 51% of like homicides are done by black men in this country? Like that if they had replaced the stat about white men with that stat, like shit would have hit the fan. They'd be like, oh my God, your viral video is so racist, you need to take it down. And it would not have had the acclaim. And I don't think that stats can be racist. Like I think that their agenda might be to make people think less of white men, and that's fine. But as long as they're not lying, I'm not super against it.
Yeah. Oh man, I had a question for you and I forgot it. Oh darn. So sorry, there was a question in there, and then I got talking about other things. So one of the things that we were talking before the show is we were talking about feminism, and since we're sort of on the white men are evil side of things, and so you're a white man, right? I'm assuming, because you kind of look it.
I couldn't be whiter. I'm German, English, and Norwegian. I'm like, yeah, very white.
So you're a white dude. Have you actually noticed any instances of this mentality of white dudes are kind of the bad guys actually affect you personally?
Well, okay, so I just graduated college a year ago, and I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I don't know, a lot of people don't know, but that's they're most recently in the news and gaining some notoriety because of the class that they're teaching, The Problem of Whiteness. That just started this semester, I believe. And the University of Wisconsin, as far as that goes, it's a pretty decent school. I was pretty isolated from all of that because I went to school for engineering. And I don't know if you know much about engineering, but you don't really have time for a lot of humanities classes. So the few humanities classes I had, like, yeah, there was a certain amount of that. I don't hang out in downtown Madison, and I don't really hang out with the kind of groups that believe this notion that, oh, white men are super privileged and therefore owe the community everything, and they can't own any of their achievements. That group, they're pretty fringe. They're a pretty small amount, and I think they're dwindling. I think their trajectory is negative. I don't think it's an ideology that's going to last very long. And the other side of that is, you know, going to school for engineering, being in the position that I'm in, it doesn't really affect me very often. Occasionally, I'll hear the arguments come up online, but that's about it.
Okay. Well, and I told you this before the show started, that I used to consider myself a feminist. So back when I was in high school, I considered myself a feminist. I took a women's studies course. I loved it. I still think it was highly educational, just because of the way that it was taught.
I think the default stance is going to be, well, yeah, of course I'm a feminist. Like, don't you believe in equality of the sexes?
Yes.
Right.
I have heard that a lot. And then I went to college, and it was in college, and I went to college near you. I went to college in Beloit. So I went to Beloit College in Beloit, Wisconsin. Small liberal arts college. And like my first week or two in, you'd go to whatever the commons area, and I held the door open for a lady to just walk past. So I just sat there and held the door, and I got yelled at for it.
Really?
Yes.
I've never had that happen.
Yeah, so I genuinely got yelled at, and the woman looked at me. It's like, what do you think? Something about patriarchy and all that. It's like, you know, you don't have to hold the door open for me. It was like, you're going inside, and you're like 2 feet behind me. I think it's gonna be okay.
Yeah, Illuminati confirmed, right?
Yeah, so I was like, all right. So that was my first taste of it, and I sort of dismissed it. It's like, whatever. People are assholes everywhere. I probably just bumped into the one asshole who's gonna give me shit about this.
Yeah.
Right. So that was my first thought. And then I actually took a class with one of the very feminist English professors. I took an English class. It was a English 101 class of some sort or another. I don't even remember the title of it. This was my freshman year. So this was like my second semester in school. So first day of class, it's a night class. It's like in it was actually my second year, so it was my sophomore year. It was tail end of summer in Wisconsin. It's like just fucking hot outside, and the building had like no air conditioning. So I was like, all right, we got to open all the windows, and we were in the basement. So I get into the classroom, and I see this elderly woman who's my teacher struggling to open the doors. So these big, heavy wooden frame, not doors, windows, struggling to that. So my first thing is, hey, can I help you open those? To which she turns around and says, what, just because I'm a woman, I can't open the windows? I was like...
Not even ironically, not even like sarcastically saying that?
No, just got mad at me. I was like, all right, fine. You open the windows, right? And it's like, at this point, this isn't still the end. At this point, I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
So I sit there and just let her struggle. I'm like, fine, you're going to be a bitch about it. You struggle all you want with those windows. And then one of the jocks comes in, big, beefy guy, like, you know, football player, big guy. She looks at him and says, hey, you look big and strong. Can you open the windows for me? Okay. And at that point, I was like, nope, I am done. That was my I am done moment with feminism, was right there. It was yeah, and since then I haven't really looked back. But
yeah, I don't blame you. Wow, that's hilarious. I mean, that's the thing. Like I don't even think about it. Men open the door for me all the time, and I'm not like, ooh, does he think I'm weaker than him? I think, oh, there's a person trying to be a decent human being. And women have opened doors for me. And I'm not like, I don't even know how I would interpret that to be like matriarchy or does she think I'm weaker? Because that doesn't make any sense in my mind. I just think people are trying to be decent people and everyone's capable of opening a door. It's just a matter of a kind gesture. Yeah. It's like a random act of kindness.
And it's one of those things, especially in Wisconsin. Like Wisconsin being nice to people is different than the rest of the country. Like Wisconsin polite is an entirely different level. Wisconsin polite is like you sit there and hold the door open for somebody when they're like 10 feet away from the door.
Yeah.
And sit there and be creepy about it.
Even though it's a chore, then they have to run for the door because they want to be Wisconsin nice and not make you wait too long.
Yeah, it's so Wisconsin nice is insane, and I was learning to be Wisconsin nice, and apparently just backfired on me. And you should never ask a feminist if they need help with anything physical, because you will get your head chewed off.
Well, I don't normally hold doors open for people, and that's really it's not it's real. I mean, I'll be honest, it's because I'm kind of inconsiderate. And I know that everyone's capable of opening a door, yada, yada, yada. And I'm not a big fan of chivalry myself. But I've never had somebody, when I do hold the doors open, I've never had that experience myself. But I think that I've heard that sentiment from other men as well. And I just think it's fascinating that someone would interpret it that way. Like, how high strung do you have to be like trying to find reasons to be offended if someone's holding a door open for you and you take that as like a microaggression or some sort of debasing your character, you know?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I always, because it gets brought up a lot when I talk like politics at the bar or whatever, is that we always seem to conclude that one of the main reasons that people get so amped up about politics is that everyone seems to be easily offended, and I actually don't mean to point sides on that one. I genuinely mean everybody gets so easily offended.
That's because I think that's because they start to personally identify with their beliefs. Like, that becomes a part of them. And if you attack their belief system, it's like you're attacking their character.
Yeah.
People become emotionally invested in what they believe, especially the longer they believe it.
And yeah, and I think that's important, especially, like I said, that this is about, being skeptical about your political views, because I don't see skeptics doing this enough.
Right.
And I think you're right. I think even us skeptics forget that when it comes to politics, we also get ourselves kind of riled up, and I've gotten riled up. If you heard me talk about politics on Earth Debates, you've seen me get riled up. Part of it, I want to make excuses and say it's because someone else is being a complete conspiracy theorist, and that I'm trying to promote scientific thinking. But at the end of the day, a part of that is that I also get emotionally invested. Sure. So when I'm sitting there and talking to, for example, a Trump supporter, I get riled up.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I'm not impervious to it either. I'm not 100%. I would like to think I'm better than most people at it, but I try to stick with, I'm the kind of person where if you convince me that I'm wrong about something, I'll just change my mind. But of course, I'm not impervious to it. I have my deeply held beliefs and values myself, and I think that's just a part of the human experience. And honestly, that's the other thing. If I could convince you of something in an afternoon, you didn't believe. If I could convince you were wrong about something in an afternoon, you didn't believe it that strongly. You didn't have a lot invested in that. In order, for instance, for me to convince somebody not to be a Christian, which isn't something I would want to do anyway, but if I were, it would have to take months. Otherwise, they didn't really believe it that strongly in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Now, since you brought this up, I guess I'm going to ask you about it. So I've come out and just said I'm an atheist. I don't do religion in any way, shape, or form. I'm very open about being an atheist. Do you have a religion or a religious preference of any sort?
Nope. No, I don't call myself an atheist. I would call myself an agnostic, just to make the difference, because there are some atheists who take just as anti-science of a stance and say, I know definitively that there is no God. Mm-hmm. And part of that's a lot of those are going to be like, it's the null hypothesis to believe there's no God, and the burden of proof is on believers. But there are a lot of things which exist right now which we have yet to prove exist. So I prefer to take the soft stance and be like, I don't know, and there's probably no way for me to know, so I don't care. Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense. And that's fine. So something that I've noticed, because I'm part of Facebook groups and all that, is a lot of atheist groups tend to be very liberal.
Yeah,
we just do.
Right.
I think part of it has to do not just on being atheist leading to liberalism, as much as it's got to do with the Christian rights sort of hatred towards atheists. I think that makes a big difference on why a lot of it's like,
I think that might be a trend that's going away too. I'm finding a surprising amount of people who like divorce the idea of right wing. Like everyone who's an atheist is left wing, and everyone who's Christian is right wing. I think there's a lot more intermixing going on. I think there's especially recently a lot more right wing skeptics coming out of the works, and I find that really fascinating. Until recently, I would have agreed, but
and I think you're right. I think because I find it funny. You asked me this, I think, earlier when we were just chatting, that you were surprised that I wasn't subscribed to Sargon of Akkad.
Right.
Because we were sitting there, and you would think that with a lot of my opinions and a lot of things that I would be subscribed to him and support him. And I don't. And I think a lot of it is because I think he's one of these new new atheists that are on the right wing side of things. And I think there are quite a few,
liberal, you might say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very odd, and I disagree with him on very particular points, but he is one of those, and I have seen it with a lot of the other sort of big skeptical figures, especially on YouTube. And part of this, part of me wanting to talk to you is to address them in a way, because as sort of this last election, which was a very divisive election, which a lot of people said a lot of things that they probably regret. A lot of people make decisions that they probably regret. The whole thing is just kind of this. It was tribalism at its just fullest, just tribalism all the way.
Yeah, I was lamenting it the entire time about how especially divisive it is.
Yeah, and because of that, I got caught up in it too. And I ended up no longer promoting some of these channels that I used to, like Armored Skeptic and Sargon of Akkad and Undoomed. And it was entirely because, not entirely, but partly it was because of their support for a lot more, not even support, a lot more excuses made for the Trump campaign.
Mm-hmm.
That was my big deal. I got really tired of excuses because I don't feel like you need to make excuses for the Trump campaign. I don't think you need to get your panties in a twist about the Trump stuff, but I don't think you need to make excuses for it either.
Okay.
Which I know you've told me in the past that sometimes people think that you're a Trump supporter or you're a Trump defender.
Yeah.
And it's got more to do with the fact that you attack the stupid arguments that people use against Trump rather than actually support the arguments for Trump.
Right. That's exactly. I've been doing a lot of that, and it's not because I agree with Trump on policy a great deal. I remember I took that like political test, and I scored as something like 56% agree with Trump and 20% Hillary. And that's probably about accurate. But yeah, I just found that the arguments against Trump, like the reasons that other people dislike him, were very much invalid when there are such common, easy ones in sight to see that you could be making arguments for instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it ended up, for me, a lot of this came down to me seeing a lot of these big skeptical figures buying into the same type of tribalism. So when I saw Sargon of Akkad, for example, defending Trump, and I think the reason, the one straw that broke the camel's back was back in whatever August, September, when that video of Trump came out talking about grabbing women by the pussy. Mm-hmm. Which to me is one of those things that I don't know why you care that he says that. Like, I feel like he said just about equally bad things in public as is, so why would you care? Like, it's like, are you really surprised that this is what he says?
Right. I wasn't surprised at all. There, and honestly, I've been offended by other things he said worse than that.
I don't like. To me, it seems like such a trivial thing to pick on when he said so many other things, and there's so much other stuff that's so easier. So I just kind of that was my opinion, and still is my opinion about those videos. It's like, whatever, it doesn't matter, and you shouldn't care about it. But when I saw Sargon actually defend it, was when I sort of started to see that for a lot of people who claim to be skeptical and claim to be scientifically minded, they had bought into this tribalism thing. So I feel like he had bought into this idea of Trump is in the camp of the enemy of my enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And so
and part of that's just to stay afloat. I mean, he's got what, 500,000 subscribers or something like that. A lot of it, I find that I would imagine as your YouTube channel gets bigger, it's hard to keep that integrity for anyone because there's this very appealing desire to cater to your audience, knowing it'll make you more successsul. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, you're right. It is. And I think that was part of it. I think that, he has over the years attracted a certain kind of person, and a certain kind of person that would agree with Trump. And that's fine. That's his, it's his channel and all that. Mm-hmm. But I found that to be slightly disheartening when it came to trying to support the skeptical community. I found the same thing with Thunderfoot, and actually not Thunderfoot himself. I don't know if you know who Thunderfoot is.
Yep, I'm familiar. I like Thunderfoot stuff too.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, yeah, one of the things that I love about Thunderfoot is he doesn't care who he's gonna go against.
Right. He's actually pretty good at keeping things nonpartisan.
Yeah, like he doesn't care. He's just gonna go after you for saying stupid things. He doesn't care if you're on the right, the left, anywhere in the middle. He will go after you if you say something stupid. That is his stance, and I like that a lot. But then I found it very interesting, and not necessarily in Thunderfoot himself, but some of his latest videos on things like Milo Yiannopoulos and on Lawrence Southern's, is the reaction of his fans is what I found interesting.
Oh yeah, 50% dislike, right? I think I saw a couple of those. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, he's not. I don't feel like it, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't feel like in any of his videos he was promoting a particular political agenda. It was, and maybe he was in a subtle way that I didn't notice, but it wasn't overtly. Like, the point of his videos were not, Milo Yiannopoulos sucks, therefore go feminism.
Right.
It was like Milo Yiannopoulos sucks because he has done X, Y, and Z in the past. Mm-hmm. And same thing with the Lawrence Southern ones. It's whatnot, Lawrence Southern sucks, therefore libertarians are idiots.
Yeah, right. No, he's not going for that. He's pointing out anecdotes, like specific examples of where somebody is wrong, which is refreshing to see. I have to say, I disagreed with him on the Lawrence Southern thing. I thought he was objectively right. Like, she attributed that. Wait, what was it? It was like she attributed Antifa to like anti-Trump protesters or something like that, right?
It was she showed footage of anarchists and said that they were anti-Trump protesters.
Right. Yeah, it was like the anarcho-communist, the Antifa guys, right?
Yeah.
And said, no, this is anti-Trump, and like, yeah, that's incorrect. Well, while I'm sure that Venn diagram, those probably closely correlate.
I think she's technically correct because they are technically anti-Trump, but they're not specific. Like, had it been Hillary, they would have been anti-Hillary.
Right. So they weren't there to protest Trump, were they? Is that what they're getting at?
Yeah, they weren't there specifically because it was Trump. They're there because they're specifically against government.
Right. Yeah.
And it just so happens that the current leader of the government is Trump.
Mm-hmm. So she could have been accidentally correct.
Yes.
But I think that was honestly more of a slip up, like a play on, like she didn't mean to say that. It just slipped out, kind of a thing. And I could be totally wrong on that. I mean, I don't agree with Lauren on everything by any means, but I thought that, like, what he made like a 20-minute video about it. I was like, I probably watched like 4 minutes. I'm like, okay, I get it. That kind of thing.
Yeah. But it was that reaction that of his subscribers that really, I think, to me, made that point that we're not as skeptics, we're not necessarily immune to as immune as we think we are to the tribalism.
Right. Exactly.
Like, yeah. So we still do it. And I saw the same thing with the Milo Yiannopoulos video where I saw all the Milo fans go after Thunderfoot and the reaction to that. It's like, he's not promoting feminism. He's not, Thunderfoot isn't promoting feminism. He's not promoting whatever, the Berkeley riots. He's just pointing out this one instance where Milo was wrong. He just was.
Yeah.
But we end up still going with our tribalistic instincts and just picking sides and whatnot.
Right. Yeah, so, I've done it myself. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think we all do it, and I think we have to be a little bit more careful about realizing that we do, which is why I think it's so important to have skeptical talks about politics. I think you can apply skepticism to politics, like what you did with the debunking Mike video. You were the better skeptic here, and you actually applied skepticism to the message that was being promoted. So I think you can do it, and that doesn't necessarily mean that I think that all skeptics need to arrive at one unifying opinion about politics, but you can be skeptical about what is said in politics and political views.
And part of that is going to be driven by my bias too, right? Because like I'm fairly certain of the notion that modern day Islam is more dangerous than modern day Christianity, which is basically the two groups we're comparing.
Yes.
Right. So like these far right extremists, like the people who want to shoot up a Planned Parenthood or whatever, they're usually going to be Christian, though Christianity might not always be the reason. Like, for instance, with the neo-Nazis, I don't think Christianity is the reason that they're going to attack minorities or, what's the recent thing? Turning over graves in Jewish cemeteries.
Oh, yeah.
It might be, it might not be. I can't speak for that, but I do believe by the numbers, modern day Christianity has evolved to be able to coincide with Western values in a way that modern day Islam still has yet to.
Yeah, we have managed to drag Christianity kicking and screaming into modernity.
Exactly.
More or less.
That's exactly it. I mean, people want to cite things like, oh, historically Christians have been the most dangerous. It's like, well, they were taking part in wars and conquering in the same way that everyone else. They were just by and large better at it. So I'm not about to try to shit on them for that,
Yeah.
But at the same time, the Crusades ended hundreds of years ago. I'm not interested in historical data in that way. I'm concerned about modern times and how things affect the present.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and you're right. And I do think, sorry, I got all these notifications going off. I do think you're right. I do, on the other hand, would say that, especially in the right, that there is an overwhelming fear of Islam that's like that. Like I think you pointed this out, but there is the left ignores the dangers far too much, and then the right exaggerates the danger.
Certainly, I would say that's true.
Yeah, and I think that's very valid. I don't think that we don't. And I know that there's problems in Europe, but honestly, and we're both in the States, and we're talking about the States here. Mm-hmm. The States just doesn't have the same kind of Muslim problem that Europe does, because we have a whole ocean between us.
And I think the primary argument that the right would give you is, yeah, we don't have the problems that they do in Europe, and we don't want to, because we see what's happening in Europe. Mm-hmm. And we want to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah. No, and I mean, like I said, it's fear. I think it's fear, and fear is it's highly motivating. It's scary to think about. When you see beheadings and you see all that, it's you don't it's understandable that you don't want those things happening in your country or in your neighborhood.
Right, absolutely.
But
and the extent to which, and I don't know, I haven't actually looked at the validity of these polls. I know Ben Shapiro, I don't know if you're familiar with him, he cites this. I think Milo has as well, but like the statistics, like the percentages of people of Muslims in the UK who are okay with having things like Sharia law or thinking that, you know, women need to always obey their husbands is actually surprisingly large percentages. And I think that if that is true, and I haven't vetted that, if that is true, that would be a cause for concern, I would say.
Yes, and I understand that. The funny part to me, though, is that I entirely understand why that would be, because I don't want to live in a country where Sharia law is a thing.
No, not at all.
I'm an atheist. I would probably be one of the first to be beheaded. Like, I don't want to live in one of those countries. The funny thing to me is, though, that if we only continue to follow the secular ideas of the government, we would never have that problem. And it's actually the Christian right that keeps trying to erode the wall of separation between church and state, without realizing that if they just keep it up, even if a Muslim shows up, or, you know, there's a Muslim city that tries to have, hypothetical Muslim city in the U.S. tries to have Sharia law installed, if we have this very clear separation of church and state, the Constitution and will clearly say, no, that's not allowed. But it's the actions of the Christian right to constantly trying to erode it that's making it easier for other religions to show up and say, well, now we want these rights. And it's entirely their own fault.
It's an interesting notion. I don't disagree with that. There's some truth to that. And those are the kind of Christians that I'm like, yeah, whatever, get out of here. I'm not interested in I'm a strong advocate of separation of church and state. Even if I was like a staunch Christian, I would still be a strong advocate of separation of church and state, because I don't believe in controlling other people's lives. Well, it was said recently, I saw this as some dumb Facebook quote, but it reigns true. You know, lessons which are forced upon somebody are lessons which don't really aren't believed in depth. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And there's some truth to that, I believe. And even if it isn't, my stance is, I don't know what's best for other people. So it's the safest for me to not want to legislate what affects other people if it doesn't affect anyone outside of them.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, even if you are a religious person, that you should be for separation of church and state, as a self-preservation.
Absolutely.
Because it goes both ways. If you start eroding that wall and saying that you can tell government what to do, it means that the government can start telling you what to do in your house of worship or whatever. And if you want to be able to keep your house of worship, then, you know, and do everything the way that you want to do it, then the best thing to do is to make sure that wall is there so that the government can't tell you how to worship.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's one of those things where if you create that big of a monster, and you're using it against your enemies or for your own good, if it turns on you, that's dangerous, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the Christian right fails to see that, like the eroding the wall makes it easier for groups that they don't like to gain more privileges in the same way. People don't see that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big shame.
But the thing is, when we're talking about these Christians who want to push their agenda, it's more of a neocon kind of attitude to have. I don't think it accounts for a really large portion of the population. By that, I mean, I know a lot of Christians who are libertarian in their values and are coming to the conclusion like, yes, I want to believe this, but I don't want this to be mandated. I don't want believers to be forced to believe this or live according to my values. And I'm seeing a lot of like both exist, but I'm seeing a sort of trend toward the latter rather than the former. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and I can understand that, and I see that. I think the problem is that currently one of the two parties that we have in the U.S. has been taken over by the religious right. Because even
it has historically been that way. But I mean, and then you look at Trump, for instance, and his platform is not very religious at all. He beat out guys like Kasich, who was really religious, and Ted Cruz, who was also really religious, but less so. I mean, I remember they were asking, oh, what's God at one of the Republican debates? It was like, what's God telling you to do in this country? And I'm over here rolling my eyes while 18 men have to answer that question. I'm like, oh God, next question. I don't care about it. But I think Trump, of those 18 men, was the least religious of that, which I find really fascinating. So I'm wondering if there's going to be a cultural shift away from that. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and maybe because I did notice that Trump is possibly the least religious president we've probably ever had, even compared to someone like Obama, which everyone thinks is like not everybody, but was called an atheist and the Antichrist and all that. And I think even he was more outwardly Christian than Trump ever was.
Well, when was the last time we didn't have a president who was accused of being the Antichrist?
That's true. But I find it funny that now I've been seeing a lot of posts about how we should be respecting the president and we should be doing what he wants because God anointed him.
Really? You see a lot of that?
I have. Well, probably because I hang out in atheist circles who repost that.
Oh, sure. Okay.
But I have seen it, and it's like, God chose Trump, therefore we should listen to him, which I find funny because Obama I felt was far more religious than Trump is, outwardly at least.
Yeah, definitely.
And yet he was, and yet the reaction there was he's the Antichrist, disobey or whatever.
This seems like another one of those cases where a lot of people would probably come to that conclusion because Obama had a more inclusive agenda, a more global. I hate to use the word globalist because it gets used by Alex Jones, but he wasn't as at least he wasn't as outwardly, vocally anti-immigration as Trump is. Trump is much more of a nationalist, much less of a globalist president.
Yes.
And a lot of people thought, well, not Trump. A lot of people probably believed that Obama's reasoning for that was to stomp out Christianity or something, which I don't obviously subscribe to, but I think it's fascinating,
No, it is. So how do you feel about the whole Milo thing?
Oh man, see, the thing is, I saw that Drunken Peasants podcast and I saw the Joe Rogan podcast when they came out, and I didn't think much of it at the time. Mm-hmm. And I still really don't. I mean, what he said was that the age of consent should stay what it is, but that some people are okay with being sexual before that age. And to a certain degree, I'm inclined to agree. First of all, the age of consent in most states is 16, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right. I think it's lower in some.
Yeah, I mean, in some parts of the world, it's much lower. And I do think the age at which we become adults and are able to give, giving consent is like knowing the implications of your actions and knowing what sex is, and not being taken advantage of by by someone who's much more powerful and being manipulated into that act, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the age at which we reach the ability to give that is going to vary. And it would be a bell curve, right? Like I imagine, there are probably some people who aren't smart enough to make that decision when they're 20.
Yes.
But I would say the majority of them are definitely there by 18, probably 16. Definitely gets gray after that. But the one thing that did stand out to me was when he said, he said on Joe Rogan's podcast that there were some people there that were very young. And I don't know how he defines very young, but it does sound like he is sort of taking the fall for some people who may have been, who may have done pedophilia, like straight up pedophilia, not just having sex with somebody who's after puberty, but not 18, but like actual pedophilia, and that is troubling to me. So I'm not sure what to make of it. What are your thoughts on it?
I think he had just a poor choice of words when he was talking.
Could be.
And I think that was his downfall. Is he was flippant about it, which for him works 99% of the time, to be flippant about everything.
To be outrageous, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like it always worked, and then he just bumped into the one situation where it didn't.
Yeah.
And then he approached it the wrong way. Granted, I'm not a fan of Milo anyway, so I honestly didn't care when I saw it. I was like, whatever. What I found more interesting, though, was when he resigned from Breitbart, and sort of when everything had just collapsed on him. What I found very interesting was how much he did turn on the feminist rhetoric when he was in that spot. How much he was, to me, it seemed like he was playing the victim a lot. And I understand part of it, he's talked about being a victim of sexual assault, but
sure,
not just that, but being a victim of, like, the media is out to get me. Oh, poor me, I'm the victim. Which for Milo is like, dude, where have you been for, like, seriously?
You're reaping what you sow, right? Yeah.
So that's the part that I found the most interesting, is that he was playing the victim when it came to, like, the media trying to take him down.
That's interesting. Yeah. I haven't seen much of that. Honestly, like I liked him on Facebook, and then like he posts things like every half hour, and I was like, dude, this is way too much. So I haven't been following him on there. I watch some of the talks he gives at colleges, but I don't sit here and watch like his public outcries and his tweets. Well, he can't tweet anymore, or his Facebook posts, because most of them are kind of stupid.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, like a lot of them are playing into that tribalism, like, oh, this mainstream media, they're leftist, and like when I start to see that kind of language, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna take a step back here before I become one of them, you know.
Mm-hmm. And it was hard because, like, when the whole Berkeley thing happened, when he was supposed to be at Berkeley, and then the riots happened, like, part of me wanted to defend him, because it's like, y'all are being dumb for rioting because someone is giving a speech.
Mm-hmm. But you have to remember too that it's only one of those people that went to the extent of lighting something on fire and throwing it. It's not that most of those rioters were bad. Most of them are probably decent people who are just there because they're against Milo.
Yeah.
But it only takes one or two bad apples to do something that takes it over the top and makes it, a public nuisance, and makes it something that makes, news headlines.
Well, the reason that I was annoyed at that, besides the damage of property, and I don't agree with any of that stuff,
yeah,
is that, to me, it seemed like if you really wanted to shut up Milo, if you really wanted him to no longer have a platform to talk on, that the easiest way to do it would be to not protest him. To just, like, he makes his money because people protest him and make
right.
So the easiest way is to set up your campus and we're having not a Milo we're not protesting Milo at all. Let him show up with absolutely no fanfare, and he'll just turn into another, person who does rounds around college, which, I mean, there's plenty of people who do that, just do talks at college, and he wouldn't be this big, celebrity or whatever that he is.
Yeah, Milo is definitely a case of like the haters make me famous phenomenon at work. I mean, every time that he does something scandalous and then the news reports on it, you see his Facebook like amount just shoot up. Like you can tell where in the graphs it is that happens. Like, boom. Oh, then he gets a book deal. And even in the case of this hysteria surrounding this potential pedophilia remarks, his like count shot up even as a result of that, despite he lost his book deal and he had to resign from Breitbart, which makes sense.
Yeah,
it's just damage control,
Yeah, so a lot of that I feel like could have that's why I was more angry at the protesters and all that, is just don't protest.
Right, exactly.
Like,
they're making you famous by doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are making it worse. Besides the fact that I always disagree with trying to silence someone else.
Yeah, and that's the most important. That's the most important value to me, is because I don't know what should and shouldn't be said. I'm not going to try to police other people's language. And if somebody comes at me with that, that's the only real cultural phenomenon that I want to kill immediately, if not sooner. This idea that we need to stop people from saying things which are bad ideas. And that's why a lot of the guys I subscribe to on YouTube, guys like Dave Rubin, guys like Sargon, who's arguably liberal, arguably not, guys like this guy Matt Christensen that I see on there a lot. It's because we share that value, and we can disagree on all the other things, but if we agree on that, we're on the same team as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm. I found it funny because I agree with you. I think, and I'm probably entirely misquoting, but I know it's out there somewhere that it's, you can take away all my rights, but as long as I have my freedom of expression, I can gain all my rights back. Right. And I forget who the fuck says that, but it's out there somewhere.
Yeah. Or like the Voltaire quote, right? Like, I disagree strongly with what you have to say, but I'll defend your right to say it. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, and I'm cool with that. But I found it surprising. So, and I'm not going to remember her name, but there's this one YouTuber who, she's Canadian, and she's an anti-feminist and makes, or at least used to make videos about Anita Sarkeesian and all that Gamergate stuff. Mm-hmm. That was her spiel. And then when it came around, October, November, she came out and was like, I'm gonna come out and support Trump. Like it matters because she's in Canada, but whatever.
Right. Yeah. Cool.
Whatever. So all right, cool. But one of the things that I found really funny about that video, that the video where she came out in support for Trump, is that she started off with a quote that I just butchered about the freedom of the press and all that. And then she acknowledged how much Trump does not actually value that freedom of speech and freedom of expression. She acknowledged it, mm-hmm. and then continued to actually be like, but I'm still going to support him.
That's interesting.
It was very interesting. It was very confusing. Like, you can't have it both ways. Like, and I don't know if you agree with me on this or not, but I see Trump as somebody who doesn't care much about freedom of speech or freedom of expression unless it's him.
That's an interesting observation to make, because like, while it's true, like, he has done things that are didn't he put out something where he was like, you're not allowed, it was something surrounding global warming, global climate change.
Yeah, he put like a gag order on like the EPA and a bunch of,
you can't say this word.
Yeah,
I think it was something like that. And that's wicked. Like, that's wickedly anti-free speech, right?
Yeah, and he does that a lot. And even, and as much as we can agree or disagree on what side of the spectrum the press is, the fact that he talks so openly against the press is also, to me, like, that's still freedom of speech, freedom of the press stuff that we need to keep, and it's important whether you agree with their message or not.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. But the interesting thing is that the neo-progressive movement, all of these people who are very pro-censorship, like anti-speech that could harm anyone, are also very anti-Trump. So I think he gets a lot of backing from people like her, because that came before his ideas about, oh, you can't say this in legal documents, that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I saw a little bit of it during his campaign. I kind of figured he would continue it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I still see him as, honestly, I still see him as like the biggest special little snowflake that there is.
Mm-hmm.
Is Donald Trump. Like,
I don't think he gets offended as often as people like to say. Like I remember, oh man, John Oliver did a piece on him about, like, oh, he gets offended when you talk about his hands. Like, come on, dude. Like, really? That's you're really grasping at air when you try to come up with stuff like that. I wanted to do a piece where I just totally respond and rebut almost every claim that John Oliver was making in that episode. But a lot of people I've noticed, I myself identify as a libertarian, first and foremost, politically. I mean, we obviously disagree on certain things, but if I identified with any party closely, It'd be that one. And I find that a lot of people are trying to make the case that Trump is a libertarian, which couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah, I've heard that, and so tell me a little. I'm not a libertarian, so you're gonna have to sort of explain to me some of the ideas and how Trump might not fit them.
Well, yeah, I mean, at the very start of it, his ideas on free market, he's not pro free market. The fact that he wants to put tariffs on China and was it potentially Mexico?
Yeah.
That's very anti-free market. Now, it might pay off. It might work out. It might make them drop their import taxes on us. I don't know. It might be it might bear utility in a way that I still find immoral regardless. But it's not a libertarian stance, is all I'm saying. Just as an example.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that he's talked a lot about deregulations and stuff like that, which I think is that a more libertarian idea of deregulations?
Yeah, getting rid of, like, just having less laws surrounding everything, less like legal loopholes, because a lot of the libertarian argument is you're going to create a law that is, and this is where kind of crony capitalism comes into it. When you create a law, the biggest corporations are going to be able to work around and manipulate that law, while the smaller players aren't going to be able to, and that's going to be their downfall more than the corporations, right?
Okay.
And there's a lot of truth to that. Like, for instance, like EPA, like if you charge, and this is where libertarians and I will disagree as far as priorities go, but when you say, oh, it's going to cost $1 million to dump this toxin into this lake, well, some corporations, if they're going to make $6 million doing it, they'll just pay that amount if it costs more than the alternative. Whereas small businesses won't be able to eat that operating expense. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
He's not libertarian in other ways too. I mean, his ideas about building the wall and making our military larger instead of reducing taxes, reducing incentive for illegal immigration in the states are very not libertarian at all.
How do you feel about so like the Dakota Access Line and the pipeline and the Exxon one?
Man, that's a really good question, and I never came to a very solidified conclusion on that myself. I know the reasons not to believe it are there. Like, for instance, they were saying it goes through burial grounds. Okay, then research and data came out saying that wasn't true, and then there's this claim that they tried to get the tribe leaders involved in talks about it for like 2 years, and then they just refused to. They didn't show up to the meetings or something, and then there's all these claims that it's affecting their drinking supply, but then there was these claims outside of that they were given millions of dollars to repurpose relocate their drinking supply to someplace 70 miles away. I don't really know, is where it comes down to. I have probably more information than the average person, but not enough to make a decision on it, to be honest.
Okay. So
what do you think?
So I guess, and I'd have to find out, but correct me if I'm wrong, but tribal land is owned by the tribe, right? Like,
right.
It's their property. Mm-hmm. So to me, putting it just comes down to, and I forget the name of it, but the government taking land from private citizens to give it to corporations.
Manifest destiny is what they use.
Yeah. So like that's the part that like, regardless of whether it pollutes their water or doesn't or any of that, it's still the government showing up, taking away your land of a private U.S. citizen and giving it more or less to a corporation.
And I find that really, really stupid if that's what they were doing. But I do remember reading that the line itself, the oil line, wasn't going to go through their property at all. Okay. That wasn't really a matter for the debate. The debate was surrounding how it's going to affect their water. That is their property. So like, it would be like the same as if I started a factory across the street from where you live and breathe, and I'm blowing smoke onto your property.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So in that way, that I think that's more where it was coming from, this notion that it's a violation of their property rights.
Okay.
And I mean, there's reason, if you look at historical impacts, there's reason to be concerned that that a pipeline going through or underneath a waterway will affect that waterway. It's not like we've never seen that happen before, right?
Yeah. 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 If nothing else, the Gulf Coast has taught us quite a bit about oil spills.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely.
and it does seem careless. To me, at least, it seems careless to do this kind of project where you do just have the potential of ruining someone else's land for the profits of a corporation, or
Hmm. But we and it's like, to what extent though? I mean, we impose on other people to an extent with everything we do. I mean, the factory that's going up in Madison, that's 20 miles away from my place, that's bringing out smokestacks, is affecting the air pollution in the area to a degree. Maybe it's only contributing a small amount. It's just a matter of, when does it become unethical? You know what I
yeah.
mean? And I think that's a really hard line to draw.
No, that's understandable. That is, you're right. That is a hard line to draw. Um, I
It's like,
don't. I
which piece of straw broke the camel's back? Which one gave me, point to the event in my life which gave me lung cancer. You know what I mean?
mhm. No, that makes sense. It is hard to decide, and I understand. And I think part of my opinion comes from the fact that I grew up in California, so I have this idea of this hippie idea of the environment still in my head
Yeah.
from growing up in California. You just you like the environment, but
Yeah, I think there's an element of validity to a lot of those arguments. I mean, like I was saying before, the one place that I do delineate from libertarian party lines probably the most is, I don't think that the libertarian narrative, the libertarian agenda, provides a good answer to pollution, air pollution, and global climate change, whatever impact you want to decide that has. I don't think that the libertarian cause has a good answer to that.
mhm.
So as far as getting rid of government policies, that would be definitely the last to go in my book, because of the tragedy of the commons effect.
Yeah. So because I've heard this, I don't know. I've always thought of this when it comes to libertarianism, this idea of the free market. I've always kind of thought of it as this. It's like a magic word that fixes everything, but not really. It's So what? So what's your answer to pollution? Well, the free market will fix it. What's your answer to businesses discriminating? Well, the free market will fix it.
Yeah.
Has always
Right.
been how.
Yeah. And sometimes people use it as a magic wand like that, like they wave it, like, oh, if I don't have an answer, oh, or the other big one, and I saw Ron Paul use this a lot, despite the fact that he's amazing. I saw him use this one a lot. Well, we'll let the states decide. Like, that's also just a scapegoat.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. And I've seen. Yeah, it was funny about the states thing. So I'm trying to figure out how. I know this got pointed out a little bit ago. I think it was about Trump, about how his sort of hypocrisy when it comes to state rights, because he's kind of state rights about a lot of things. Oh, it was a war on drugs, war on
Oh, sure.
drugs, because he's very states rights about a lot of things, and then it came to the war on drugs, and then he's all like, no, we're gonna,
Interesting.
which I found funny, because it's like right now that's definitely a states' right thing, like individual states, well, at least when it comes to legalizing marijuana, individual states are getting to decide on their own whether they want to do it or not. There is no federal decision on that. It's just
Right.
every state gets to. So you'd figure that Republicans and conservatives would be all for that. Like, that state has decided, and yet you have someone like Trump who decided that he wants to double up the efforts on the war on drugs.
I would not be surprised if I'll use legalization of marijuana, for instance, as an example. I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't as partisan of a deal as you'd think. Meaning, I don't know if it's a strongly Republican stance to be anti-legalization of marijuana. I wouldn't be surprised if there were a lot of Democrats who are also making up the percentage of people who believe that, which is a dwindling percentage as it is of the population as it is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it'll be. I think at the end it'll end up being a lot like gay marriage, where it eventually sort of
Oh, definitely
became.
eventually. What I'm saying
Yeah.
is, I talk to people my age, and whether they're Republican or Democrat, nobody my age cares whether you smoke weed or not. It seems to be more of an old person thing than a partisan thing.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean about, like, it's similar to the gay marriage thing, is that as the older folks started dying out, the younger folks kept coming in from all sides being like, well, we don't really care, and it eventually just sort of got to the point where, you know, more than 50% of the country really didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, like, then that was it. Now it is the law of the land because all the old people who cared are dead.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a done deal.
So I could see the same thing happening here, that eventually all the old people who care about marijuana being the drug, you know, that kills you, dying out, and it just being legal everywhere.
And, you know, that's the thing. I feel like politicians are pretty, overall, kind of out of touch with their constituency with this particular, talking about marijuana and all that. It seems like kind of irrelevant to me, but I don't think that the majority of people, I mean, I think we had a poll where you could vote when you were voting on something or other here in the county that I live. And the majority, like, that was the question, was should marijuana be legalized? I don't know if it was just for medicinal or if it was for recreational in general. And the polls came out, and I think 54% said that they were in favor of it being legalized. And that's here in, I don't know what it is elsewhere, but I don't think the majority of people really give a shit, is what it comes down to. And I don't know why it's still an issue.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, looking at the sort of the areas that have legalized it, they all seem to still be, I guess, younger areas, less, like, you know, it's like places like California and Colorado.
Well, Colorado's making a huge bank on it, but that's also because it's illegal everywhere else in the United States.
Yeah, and that'll change in a few years, probably.
Yeah. But then you look at places like Portugal, and I haven't done the research on this. I've just heard, like, the country of Portugal, which is decriminalized all drug use, I believe.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah.
And they're doing remarkably well despite that. I think that that's really awesome.
Yeah. And I'm all for decriminalizing. It's one of those things that it's because how to put this, as a personal experience, like I used to work with sort of at-risk youth back when I lived in California, and I had a kid bright kid, really good kid, but in California you have he'd been sent to juvie already, and he was kind of on parole with me. And the reason that he was sent was because he had like a couple of ounces of weed with him. Okay. So, and this kid had, you know, he was a young dad. He had a kid.
Well, a couple ounces is definitely intent to sell, right?
Yeah.
Well, not definitely, but there's a good chance. You know, I mean, a couple of ounces, like $600 worth of weed.
Is it? I'm trying to remember. Okay, I'm probably grams. I'm probably thinking grams and not ounces because I'm terrible at. You can tell how much of a pothead I am that I can't actually tell you.
Oh man, did I just incriminate myself by saying how easily I can convert that?
Yeah. So I don't. Yes, I so rarely fucking buy drugs that I don't even know how you buy them. He had enough to smoke for himself and a friend.
Okay.
So I'll phrase it that way. He had enough, so it wasn't. He did not have intent to sell. He was carrying a little bit for his friend to sell. So he got picked up. And then while he was with me, he got picked up for the same thing. So here we have a kid who's got a son, like legit a kid, like he's like 16-year-old kid who's got a kid of his own. So he can't be there for his kid. And now he's got to go to juvie for wanting to get high.
Yeah.
And it was like, that's one of those, like, just that to me feels incredibly stupid.
Yeah, you're taking a parent away from their child because they smoked weed. That's insanity to me. That is insane to me.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying like smoking weed is the best thing for you. I mean, it's certainly not. But I mean, and I the only argument I can see for keeping it illegal is that when people drive, if they're under the influence, too much under the influence of weed, it can affect their motor skills, and there's no way to really test for it. That's the only thing that I can come up with.
But even I feel like even states that have had legalized marijuana, like Colorado and like Alaska, have managed, like they managed to have DUIs for weed without.
Have they? Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Like, so they must have some metric, but they don't have a metric for like blood alcohol level. Like they don't have a metric for like, oh, he's too high to drive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, putting somebody in prison for that is absolute insanity. That's counterproductive on both ends. You're losing a person, and you have to pay for their asylum now. That's insane.
Mm-hmm. And so I do wish that we would, if nothing else, decriminalize drugs, because I don't think having them be criminal is ever going to help anybody.
I predict that'll happen in the next 5-10 years on a federal level. But then that does also beg the question, like, then there's this conspiracy that it's like, well, big pharma keeps pushing to not have legalization because if weed became, and weed like cures a lot of symptoms for common ailments, if that got out and it's so cheap, it would alleviate the need for a lot of big pharma's reach. And I actually don't have a very good counter argument to that, despite not subscribing to it myself.
Yeah, that's true. And I have heard that before. I find it kind of, I don't know, I find it kind of funny, because I feel like it's one of those things that, like, if you were big pharma and you knew that THC has these effects on symptoms and you could help people out, like I know it helps with like chemo and stuff. Then I feel like making it illegal is the or pushing to make it illegal is a stupid thing to do if you're big pharma.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. It's like if it became legal, federally legal, I'm sure that Marlboro and Camel have, they have the infrastructure waiting for it to become legal so they can start making it and have, packs of it out, Marb Greens out on the shelves next week.
Yeah. Or whatever store, or whatever pharmaceutical wants to do it. It's like, oh, we will do, perfectly measured out dosages of weed for you that you can buy at fucking CVS. Like, yeah. So I feel like you benefit more from making it legal and then producing it to sell to people for all the symptoms rather than the other way around.
Yeah, it's just, it would become really, really cheap at that point too. And then because marijuana is a really easy plant to grow, and I could see it becoming one of those things where they lose grasp. Like, I mean, I couldn't right now make, antibiotics in my I couldn't grow antibiotics. I couldn't grow, ADHD medication in my basement. And if it became that easily accessible by the public, maybe they wouldn't be able to monetize it anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I could see that. Because I know if I remember right, the laws in both Colorado and California allow you to grow your own.
Yeah. For
personal use, you're allowed to grow your own. So it is extremely cheap. And I guess, God, and see, now I feel like we are going down the rabbit hole of being conspiratorial, because I've heard this before for like everything. Like, the big pharma doesn't want you to know that you can just eat kale all day long and be healthy, and instead of,
right. You gotta detox. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I could see the point. But then again, I could see how big pharma would want to maybe work on a way to sell it themselves, because people will still buy medicine. Like, if you were to make a THC pill, people would probably still buy it, even though it would be cheaper to go to your local bodega or whatever.
Right.
People are stupid.
It's like how I could still grow tobacco if I wanted to, but it's so much more convenient to just buy a pack for $7. Yeah. That's the thing. It's $7 for if they made weed and they sold it for, I don't know, $5 a pack. Maybe that's a whole lot less marketable or profitable than selling a drug for $30 a pill that does the same thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. That is interesting.
That's the thing about conspiracies. It's like, yeah, most of them are probably bullshit, but what's the chances that all of them are bullshit?
No, and I don't because I'm accused of this all the time. I'm not against conspiracy theories because conspiracy theories have happened. I always point to like
Watergate. Right?
Watergate. Even more recently, the whole thing with the DNC helping out Hillary over Bernie. That was a conspiracy. It actually happened. There's no denying that a conspiracy occurred. That's not the problem. The problem is with those we got evidence to demonstrate that it happened. When you just assert a conspiracy and then don't actually give any evidence for it, it's kind of, that's when things get dicey.
And I think a lot of people are quick to dismiss something as a conspiracy theory because it seems unlikely, or it's like, well, what would the motive be? Or it just doesn't gel well with their understanding of reality at present. So it's really easy to dismiss that kind of stuff. Like, I'll be honest with you, I used to subscribe to the idea that fluoride in the water was really, really dangerous. And to this day, I when I get my teeth cleaned, I still don't get the fluoride rinse. And it's because I know in certain concentrations it is dangerous. I did look into it a lot, but someone brought up a good point to me, for instance, with it. It's like, well, if they put it in the drinking water, how much is it in contact with your teeth before you swallow it? Not very long, so that doesn't really make sense. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so woke. Fluoride's bad for you, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm, you know what I mean? It's just one of those things where I had less knowledge and now I have more knowledge, but I still err on the side of caution. It still sticks with me to a certain degree.
Yeah, I tend to be a little bit more aggressive towards dismissing conspiracy theories, but I think that's more got to do with the fact that, like I've told you earlier, my whole channel is about flat earthers, which means that I get crazy conspiracies all the time. So at this point, I've kind of gotten to the habit of just dismissing like 90% of them, because probably closer to 99% of them, because I get bombarded with crazy all the time.
Right. Do people actually, I didn't know there was a market for like flat earth disapproval. I thought it was like a fringe, maybe 2,000 people in this nation that like subscribe to the notion that there's a flat earth.
Oh, no, it's bigger than that. I don't know. I'd give it a couple 100,000 people.
Really? Worldwide?
Yeah, probably worldwide. I wouldn't, like, it's not, I mean, it's a lot more than I want it to be, because I still think that's 200,000 people that are really like that are really at the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
So I still think it's too high, but it's not, I mean, it's nowhere near as high as anything else. And you can look at it. I mean, you look at the big flat earth move, you know, the big guns in the flat earth movement, especially on YouTube, which is kind of like the new frontier for flat earth.
Wow. I didn't know.
You know, some of those have like, you know, 50,000 subscribers maybe.
Wow.
So
that's more than the most prominent alt-right guys have.
Yeah. So I mean, they're out there. They're a relatively big crowd. I mean, they're not like a dangerously huge crowd. Like I said, I don't think that at any moment they're gonna go and take over the government and be able to expose NASA or whatever their plan is. They don't have the numbers for that, but they have the numbers to be annoying.
That's so interesting. I remember I first heard about flat earth theory when who's that guy? B.O.B. You know that
Yeah, B.O.B.
That guy came out and he was having like some sort of back and forth on Twitter with Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's like in the science community. Like, if I was gonna go gay, it would be for Neil deGrasse Tyson. You know,
I don't blame you.
Yeah, I'm not, but you know. And I was like, I looked into a few of their claims and I was like, oh, so it's a bullshit movement. And then I moved on. And I didn't really realize that it had picked up that much steam, because it's one of those things where if you see 3 bullshit claims in a row, you're going to be like, okay, that's enough of this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, it is a very weak, very silly idea. But I don't know, something happened last year. I want to say, last year, 2015, something happened, and it took off. Like It really did. Like, you had flat Earth channels popping up all over the place, and everyone was talking about it. It was really odd, which is why I got into it. It just sort of became the hot topic in the skeptical science debunking side. It's just because, you know, if you spend enough time in the scientific debunking side of YouTube, we've talked about fucking creationism, and we talked about anti-vaxxers, and we talked about climate change for like ever now. Like, it's been the topic for so long.
Yeah, those seem like low-hanging fruit. You know, it's like, it's very obvious that creationists, you know, the whole 6,000 years old or 10,000 years old idea, like that's pretty, you know, easy to be like, come on, really. And then like the anti-vaxxers and all that seems like really easy stuff to agree on. And it's the harder stuff where people are going to start to disagree.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because, like, it ends up. One of the things that happens is, so for example, there's this thing called the Mandela effect. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it. It's honestly like the stupidest thing in the world. It's named after Nelson. It's named after Nelson Mandela because I guess a bunch of people were under the impression that Nelson Mandela died in like 1986 or whatever, instead of when, you know, instead of when he actually did.
Instead of last year. Yeah.
And so people were like, well, I thought he was dead from 1986. So so the easy explanation for this is you were wrong, and he died last year. Like, you were very obviously just wrong. You understood this idea incorrectly. But instead of doing that, what people who subscribe to the Mandela effect have said that no, they're right. Nelson Mandela died in 1986. It's just that they've moved over to a different universe where Nelson Mandela hadn't died yet.
Really?
Yes. Not even shitting you. This is a thing. So
I've never heard that before. That's quite a claim to make.
Yes.
And it's also one of those claims where you can't disprove. How are you going to disprove that?
Oh no, you can't. There's nothing you can do to disprove this. This just
no.
And so what ends up happening is people make all sorts of claims like Febreze, because I guess Febreze, even though you say it Febreze, is only spelled with one E instead of two E's. And so all these people were like, well, this whole time it's been spelled with two E's, not one E. So I've switched to a different universe where Febreze is now spelled with one E instead of two E's. And like this always happened, like Chick-fil-A, anything that's sort of these slightly different thing is considered a shifting universe. And you will be amazed at how many people, if not buy into it, give it enough attention for it to be like relatively well known.
That's like, so interesting.
Yeah, and that's where the problem sort of starts happening, is you have people who should know better, who don't necessarily buy into the whole idea, but buy into just like the snippets of it at sort of the tail end that make these ideas dangerous. Chemtrails.
I don't know how you can weaponize the idea that we're in a different universe, though. Unless you're going to say, like, and the government's keeping it from you, therefore we should kill people or something.
Well, the thing is, it's a lot of it is like CERN is doing this to us, the large collider thing. They're running experiments, and so it's their fault. So there is this big conspiracy cover up over it. And I mean dangerous, not necessarily in like the violent way, but dangerous in like these ideas, these crazy ideas of you know, the Mandela effect and other things informs individuals. And then those individuals then go out and use their money power and their voting power to make decisions.
But do they have much power, you know? Other than voting, I imagine the kind of people who subscribe to notions like that don't have a lot of power in their lives.
Well, if you have money, you have a decent amount. So you can
That's
still...
right.
So, you know, how much is it? I don't know. But if you have money, you still have, you know, the power of the dollar to promote your idea. And if you have enough of them together, then you have a lot of dollars together speaking very loudly.
Yeah, that just seems like a pretty a pretty docile belief to have, unless I don't know. That's really just, I don't have much to say on that. That's just a really fascinating idea.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is a lot of these ideas are very benign. Like you're right, it's not going to hurt anybody. Same thing with the flat Earth. The flat Earth isn't going to hurt anybody.
Right.
That you think that the Earth is flat. But then you start getting into people who it's like a snowball effect. You start getting all of these ideas. So you'll often find people who are like in the flat Earth movement. It's not just that they believe that the Earth is flat. You know, that they believe the government is a big conspiracy, or is conspiring and to hide everything. And then they start believing that like all terrorist attacks are just false flags and they're all faked. And then they start believing that all the food that they eat is made to mind control them, and like it starts piling up. So then you have it's just a giant pile of just small benign beliefs that just pile up into this giant mass of really stupid beliefs, which then informs the decisions that these individuals make.
And I mean, I guess it could happen where they believe all these things, flat Earth, the chemtrails, and then they go with this one, and because it's just if you have someone who's in such a vulnerable position that they believe this many things outside of reality, you can then throw down and the Jews are making everyone else believe the opposite, and we need to stop them, or something like that.
Well, you have, and for example, not that I expect you to go comb through my comment section, but if you go comb through my comment section, you will find people that call me a paid show. People think that I am a paid government employee who does.
Well, how do I know you're not?
I know, but that's what I get. Like, I genuinely get that from people. People are like, you are paid by the U.S. government to come on to YouTube, make these videos to as part of shutting down the flat Earth movement.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can be dangerous. In sort of in that kind of way where it can pile up and just be just a giant ball of stupid.
See, if someone accused me of that, like, oh, you work for the government and they pay you to do this, my response would be, I will give you $5,000 if you can prove that. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, that should be a good enough incentive. You probably don't have that much money. $5,000 if you can prove that.
Mm-hmm. No. You'll be amazed though. Nobody ever bothers to actually. So we'd always asked flat earthers, the group, the groups that I'm in and all that. We'd always ask flat earthers to actually demonstrate their conspiracy. So like I said earlier, that the Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, DNC conspiracy was a real thing. And it was proven by a set of emails, like very definite evidence. So we'd always ask, like, where are the invoices or where are the emails and government agencies? Like, give us these things, but yet it's never provided for us anyway. So
yeah.
So you're right. I will probably never get if I were to put a $5,000 challenge on proving that I'm a government agent, no one would ever. I mean, because I'm not.
But that's just about saving face. It's like, instead of not responding, it's like, okay, dude, like getting back in their face, like, yeah, prove that. And there's this much more. I'm not even betting you. I will just give you money if you can prove that that's the case. That should be enough incentive for you. You have nothing to lose. Have at it.
Yeah. No, I would. It would be impressive if I got any amount of evidence for anything from the flat Earth movement.
I'd be really curious to see what they come up with. And I would say proof, not evidence, because you can find evidence for anything. Like, oh, this is evidence which would suggest this. But no, give me proof. Prove it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'd be interesting. I'll see. Yeah. We'll see. Well, flat earthers come on my channel, so if you see that, and I guess if you can prove that I'm a government agent of some sort, you can have his money.
Are you declaring it right now? $5,000
right now. $5,000. You can have his money. If you can demonstrate that I'm a government agent who is paid to make YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Oh. with my paltry amount of my paltry budget that barely allows me to have a fucking crappily cropped out cat as a logo. Like,
oh, that's funny. Yeah.
I don't know. I've embraced the cheapness of my channel. I don't even care. It's like, yeah, I'm doing it on a low budget. Deal with it.
You know, that's the thing. I went out and I got a decent camera that I don't know how to use yet very well. I've not only not gone into trying to figure out how to use it well, but I don't have lighting. So I have to keep the ISO really high. And as a result, it's all grainy.
Yeah. It gets expensive. Like I was looking into it because like the one thing that I did buy is I bought a nice microphone because I was just using like the crappy one that's attached to my computer. And
Yeah.
so it's an awful microphone. So I bought a good microphone, and then when I bought a good microphone, it's like really sensitive, so it was picking up that pop that happens when you say like T's and S's. Your microphone picks that up, and so then you need a pop filter, and those things are like $60 or $70. And I was like, why would I spend $60 or $70 for a thing that's just like. And it just slowly starts accumulating. You start looking into, oh, you need soundproofing foam for your walls so that the sound doesn't bounce off walls, and it sounds awful. And it can snowball out of control if you start really trying to be all fancy about this.
Yeah, definitely. I've got a pretty decent microphone too. I don't know if my audio's been decent this entire talk or not.
I think so.
Okay, I'm like audible and then like it's not an issue. Because I've got a nice mic, but I can only choose to plug in headphones or a mic. And if I choose to plug in a mic, you're going to get feedback from hearing yourself through my computer.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No, the YouTube scene. It's fun.
Yeah, it is. I just started doing it honestly as a cathartic experience for myself because it's exhausting seeing the same arguments over and over and over again. And I wanted to be like, okay, one final statement to solve this. And I can just refer people to that statement going forward. And I honestly, like, for me, I believe a lot of things that are very counterculture. And I want to hear what the response to what I have to say is. And I like the smart response to some of the things that I believe. Like, I just want to hear, like, how would a person who disagrees with me respond to this? So, like I make a lot of videos about, I've probably done like 4 about immigration so far. And I'm personally pretty ambivalent about immigration. I have no idea what to believe. I think it's a case by case basis. I think, for instance, Mexican immigration is a totally different ballgame as far as arguments go from, say, Muslim immigration.
Yeah,
like it'd be a total different set of arguments you would use to support either of those. And I just like to hear what people respond to if I say this counter argument, because I don't know what I would say.
Yeah. No, immigration is an interesting one. That was one of the last Monday. I went out to dinner with friends for my birthday, and one of the topics that came up was politics, which is just hilarious that I get to talk about politics at a dinner party with my friends on my birthday, because my friends are nowhere. I hang out with a bunch of old white people who are all retired military.
Really?
And I know I have odd friends.
That's interesting.
But those are my friends. They're all old retired military. And so we have very, very clashing opinions about a lot of things.
I'll bet.
But one of them, and I found this interesting. One of them, a friend of mine, he came out to my wedding out back in July. He came out to California to my wedding. So he got to meet my parents, and he got to meet my family, and he got to go out to the farm where my parents farm. And my parents and I are all first generation immigrants. Like, I was born in Mexico, spent a few years there, and then moved here. So we're all first generation Mexicans, who I was illegal in the country for a few years because my visa expired and I just never left the country.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a U.S. citizen now.
Yeah.
And so with my parents, there was a portion of the time that we were here in the past where we were all here illegally.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was very interesting to this very conservative friend, because he got to meet my parents, and he's like, your parents, they own their own business. They work hard like all the time. I saw them out farming. Like, this is hard work. They're really hardworking people. And he sat there and was like, and he asked me, like, if the Trump's immigration stuff that's going on now, like, how do you feel about that? And I was like, well, if it had happened, 20 odd years ago, I wouldn't be here talking to you now.
Depending on the extent to which it was enforced, yeah.
Yeah, but like, well, if it's enforced to the degree it's being enforced right now, because it's heightened enforcement has happened.
Yeah, I thought it was like 600 people have been deported so far, or something like that, but I don't remember.
I'd have to look it up. But it was one of those things that if we go from it just a straight up, let's not take a look at the nuance of it, but if you're here illegally, get the fuck out mentality, then you would have kicked out a family that is small business owner family that you all are supposed to be supporting, and you would have kicked them right out because and so I think that for him triggered something, and we got into talking about immigration. And I mean, right now my stance is that whatever we're doing right now, is entirely wrong, because I feel like we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's just like, let's just get rid of everybody. It's like, well, you don't know what the consequences of doing that is, because it is more nuanced than just everybody who's here illegally is a bad guy.
Right. Obviously, it's going to be a lot more. I think it's going to be a lot more nuanced than that, and I think most people would agree to that if they're in their right mind. The question that's going to be arisen is it going to make the country as a whole better or worse if we enforce that law to its fullest extent?
Yeah.
And that's where the argument really can begin. It's like, well, and a lot of people are going to go, well, technically anyone who's here illegal is a criminal. And that's a really stupid argument, because that's just changing the goalpost. Okay, well, people doing bad things, I can't call it criminals that I care about anymore. I have to care about people who are doing malicious acts.
Yeah.
And then the argument becomes, well, are the people who are here illegally more or less likely to do that?
Yeah. And it's one of those things, because I do find it funny when people say, they're here illegally, therefore they should have, the full extent of the law. It's like, how often do you speed? How often do you break some?
Right. Yeah.
It's like,
that's a good point. Yeah.
Like, you're okay with it because it's not you, but the moment it's you, you're gonna be a little pissy about, like, what law did you break that's not malicious? Like,
I break all sorts of laws.
Yeah, it's
absolutely. That's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, and we all do. We all speed. We all occasionally run a red light. We all forget to stop at a stop sign. We all whatever, but we're not doing those things to be malicious. Right. That's not the intent.
Right, because it's the law is an appeal to authority, not an appeal to morality. And I don't really like. And that's a big thing about libertarians too, is libertarians don't give a fuck about what is legal or not legal. They care about what's moral or immoral. And that's, yeah. So I personally, if I was vehemently against immigration, it would never be because it's illegal. That's the law and that's just the way it is. Like, no, we get to change the way things are. It's about whether we should or not.
Yeah. But you're right. It would be interesting to see, and I've seen a couple of studies, but even the studies themselves say that they're not 100%. They're not very sure, because the data is hard to come by about illegal immigrants and their crime rate, and most of them show slight increase, but not not anything different than the general population.
Yeah. And if they'd been enforcing that all along, one of my closest friends wouldn't be here if they'd have been enforcing that effectively all along. And I mean, that's an emotional argument. I can't be like, because, obviously I wouldn't miss him if I'd never met him, right? But yeah, that's, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second.
No, but I think this is one of those cases where I feel like it's okay to bring up some of those more emotional problems, because we are talking about people and how it affects them. Like, because because I think it is important to keep in mind things that, for example, if you're brought here at the age of 3 by your parents and you live here till the age of 16, and at 16 you get deported to a country you don't know anything about, it's like those are the kinds of things that we do need to think about. It's like, what are we really benefiting the country by deporting a 16-year-old to a country they don't know, instead of keeping them in the country that they do know and may be able to,
right,
potentially, if they're not causing trouble, then potentially be a benefit to society.
And I know that the Republican counter argument to that is going to be, well, you can't really blame the government for that. You can blame your parents for keeping you here illegally. You know what I mean? And that's got some merit to it. But the question really for me becomes, well, is that what we ought to do and why?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want them to enforce the marijuana rule and like start imprisoning everyone or giving out tickets to everyone who smokes weed, because, well, if we imprisoned everyone for that, the majority of people would be in prison, obviously. So yeah, laws and morality don't overlap 100%. I wouldn't say they overlap 50% even at this point.
Yeah. No, it does get difficult to parse out the two. But I think unfortunately this last election has made, because I think tribalism won in this last election, it has made it so that people aren't having these conversations about what is the moral thing to do or not. It's become this conversation about the other versus me. So these immigrants are the other.
Well, yeah, I'm seeing. I really don't know a lot of people who are really worried about Mexican immigration. If I'm being honest, I don't know a lot of people who are worried about that. I know a lot more people who are worried about Muslim immigration, and I think there's a lot better arguments for us to be concerned about that than Mexican immigration.
Yeah. Well, and also I mean, you're also in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's true. That's a huge part of it too. I'm in frickin' Wisconsin. If I was in Texas, I'm sure that'd be a very different story.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of the people that I heard who sort of are very opposed to immigration are people who live on the southern border. But they get to experience it more often. So when the argument is, they're taking away my job, they literally are not having. They are literally being picked second after someone else. So it does very much so affect them.
But I mean, and that's the thing. The argument that I hear a lot of bad arguments from the immigration, like the pro-immigration side, and I feel like I have to tackle those. Like, for instance, this notion that it's unconstitutional to not let person X or person Y in. The Constitution doesn't really have any say about how exclusive or inclusive we have to be about immigration.
Yeah.
I mean, they say, make no laws respecting one religion. Well, that applies to our citizens, not to anyone outside of the country. That applies to those here. And I'd be right with everyone on the extreme left and through if we started deporting people who were Muslims, who were citizens. That would be absolutely awful, and I would be out there with a picket sign in hand, ready to do the Lord's work if that was the case. But that isn't the case, and that's not what's happening.
So I don't you'd have to ask a constitutional scholar about this. But from my understanding of the Constitution, it is not about citizens. Like there are laws there are rights that are specifically for citizens in the Constitution, but the Constitution itself makes very few distinctions between what covers a citizen and what doesn't. So things like freedom of religion isn't exclusive to citizens, or freedom of the press, or freedom of speech, or any of that. Like, it's not an exclusively a citizen thing. And the Constitution has very specific, like, these are the rights of citizens, which include like voting and whatnot.
Okay, but let me put an example out there. If we had somebody who was an immigrant who wanted to come into the U.S. and we asked, well, what religion are you? And they had this religion where they made up this belief system where they believe that all white people are bad and we need to exterminate, or it doesn't have to be white people, it could be black people.
Yeah.
My religion believes that we need to exterminate this demographic of person. I would be okay with them saying, we're not going to let you in, and the reason is because of your religious beliefs. And I'm not trying to say that that's what Islam is at all.
No.
But like, if we take it to an extreme in that way, it readily becomes available. Like, yeah, I think we can exclude citizenship from them based on that.
So
I mean?
I guess at that point I would say it becomes a question of, I mean, are you going to really exclude somebody for a crime that they haven't committed?
Right, and that's the thing. In that case, the argument could be made that we shouldn't do that, but I wouldn't think it's unconstitutional. And but then again, if they're a citizen already, I would think it'd be unconstitutional to kick them out.
Yeah.
Based on that, I would be like, okay, you can have that belief if you're like, if a citizen suddenly became a part of that belief, you'd be like, okay, you can have that belief, but the minute that you actually incur violence on another person, we're putting you away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But I feel like that, like, if we keep the secular idea of government, then you can have the idea all you want that all Jews need to die or all whatever is needed to die. You can keep that idea full-heartedly and believe in it all you want, and it's not a problem until the moment that it actually
exactly
the moment that you do something about it, then we're going to have an issue.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. Like everyone was all hysterical about Richard Spencer recently, who is a piece of shit. Like, in my opinion, I'm not on board with anything he believes, just as a preface to what I'm saying. But he has, from what I've seen, never called for violence against anyone. So when I see people punching him in the streets, I'm like, no, that doesn't warrant what you're doing. It doesn't warrant violence.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do think that the US would be okay to look at immigration in terms of, well, what do we have to benefit? Like, if we don't think that it's going to benefit our country as a whole to bring in this individual, I don't think we have an obligation to do so.
Yeah, and I understand that, but and I think that's more or less how it works in the legal route of becoming. Yeah. So for example, that's how I became a U.S. citizen. Is I went that route. So my dad had to get a work. My dad and I had to get, my whole family really, we had to get work permits, which had to be used. That was our first step. We had to first demonstrate that we could work in the U.S. and then actually hold jobs with that permit.
Okay.
That was like the first step. It's like, all right, so we're going to let you into the country with the promise that you will work and you will benefit society in that way.
Like, you have to be on the payroll? Like, how do you prove that you work?
You had to actually be on the payroll.
Okay. Does that mean I couldn't start my own like roofing business and get paid in cash and then?
I think it has to do with taxes more than anything else. So, you know, if at the end of the year you can demonstrate that you are, you know, gaining income in a legal way, you could do it. And then after that, you go through all the different steps. But at the end of it, you end up having to demonstrate, like, the thing that I had to do was demonstrate that I was a benefit to the U.S. So I had to demonstrate that one, I wasn't harming anyone in the U.S. So that's one of the big things. If I had any felony at all whatsoever on my record, not going to be a U.S. citizen. Well, my criminal record more or less had to be squeaky clean, besides, I think, misdemeanors.
Okay.
So you had to demonstrate that part. So I feel like that's already the route that you propose is already the route that exists, the legal route. Right. So that's how you get here legally. It's the illegal route that's more complicated.
Well, and then that's the thing. How do you? And this is kind of the question that I brought up in my more recent video was, and that's great and all for with regards to Mexico, but how do you vet for people coming here from a different country? How do you vet for their crime if something like rape isn't even criminalized in the country they're coming from, or if it is, it's not enforced as a crime?
Yeah, it is difficult, and because I know that especially in a lot of Middle Eastern countries, laws aren't such a thing.
Yeah, in North Africa, like in Morocco and Algiers and Tunisia, that kind of stuff. Ooh.
No, you're right. I don't know. And it is a good question. I don't know what the vetting process is for other countries, because I know that I don't know. I'm told that it is stricter for Middle Eastern countries than it is for like Canadians and Mexicans.
Yeah, that would make sense.
But I don't know how much stricter, and I don't know, I don't know what they go through to do it. But I do know that there is a vetting process that takes time. It's not you don't just fill out a form and get a rubber stamp and come in through.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, I've been accused of xenophobia before, but here's the thing. For me, if a person is not going to be a threat to, it's not going to be like a violent, criminal threat to anyone here, or they're not more likely to than the people who already live here, and their cultural values aren't like trying to overthrow American Western values, I have no problem with anyone coming here.
So here's a question, because you said this, and I'm curious now, because you said this idea, your values aren't trying to overthrow Western values. How do you feel about people like the Amish? Who
The Amish?
Yeah,
the Amish do not immigrate here, though, dude.
No, I know, but so if we have this idea that, more broadly speaking, you have to sort of adopt Western values to be in the U.S. How do you deal with groups like the Amish?
That's really interesting. That's a good point, because the Amish, they don't exist in large numbers, and you don't really hear from them very much. I actually lived in Pennsylvania for 2 months last year, so I saw them all the time.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem I had with them was that there was horse shit all over the bike lane everywhere I went.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
They reject Western traditional Western values.
By the Western values I'm talking about are freedoms, like freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. Those core ones are the ones that I'm referring to. They're not trying to disrupt that in any way. I don't think the Amish have social security numbers, which means I don't think that they vote either, do they?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know.
I've had to look into it. I bring it up not necessarily to pick on the Amish, but that we mostly to point out that we have sort of these groups already in the U.S., like that are kind of American citizens that refuse to assimilate with the rest of society. We have these groups, and we let them be, right? Like, we let the Amish do whatever the hell the Amish want to do. We don't bother them, and they don't bother us. So this idea that we have to, that if you want to be in the States, you have to assimilate is like, well, we're not actually doing that anyway.
But then the thing with the Amish, though, and this, I guess you could take it on a case-by-case basis, is the Amish and what is it? Amish. What's the one that's really similar to Amish?
Quakers?
No. It's like the Quakers. Starts with an M. I don't remember. It's a certain sect of Christianity. But they're also pacifists to the core.
That's true.
So they're kind of a total non-threat in that way.
Okay, so then to maybe have a better example, because if you go to like a big city, if you go to Chicago, you'll see the different parts of Chicago are sectioned off nationally. So you have your Chinatowns of and every and again, we don't go into Chinatown and be like, no, go assimilate with white people. It's like, all right, you can have your Chinatown and you can have all your signs in Chinatown can be in Chinese. You don't have to speak English. You just have to be here without bothering everyone else. Don't bother your neighbors, and we're cool. So we already sort of segregate without making a big deal out of it. So I don't understand why, if someone from another country wants to come in here and segregate themselves, why we have to be like, no, you can't. You have to assimilate. We don't even expect that as is.
Yeah, no, you're right. So like, Islam and the Amish both say Western culture is a sin and you will go to hell for it. But like we were talking about earlier, it doesn't become a problem unless it's like, well, what are you going to do about it? And if the answer is, I'm going to attack people who participate in that culture, that's when we start to have a problem, I think. Yeah.
And I think you're right. I mean, there is a big difference between the Amish and the Muslims. I don't want anyone to think that I think the Muslims and Amish are the same. There is a big difference. but I also feel like it's one of those things that, and it sounds awful because like I don't want people to get hurt, but until you actually commit the crime, I don't know how much you can. I feel like if we start restricting people for, at that point we are restricting them for thought crimes. Like, at what point do you stop?
Yeah,
It's like it's that thing. Your right to swing your fist ends at my nose.
But it's one of those things where, like, if we know going into it that like a certain percentage of Muslims would do that if they came here, I don't think we have an obligation to allow Muslims. And I'm not saying I'm for a Muslim ban at all. That's not at all what I'm saying. I think it's a lot more nuanced than that. But the point that I'm trying to get across is that I don't subscribe to the notion that we have an obligation to let people, to have the default be we let anyone into the country. Like, the default could be we don't let anyone into the country unless they meet these criteria, rather than we let anyone into the country unless they meet these criteria. Does that make sense?
Yeah, go ahead. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, like there are a lot of countries. I mean, the commonly used example is, well, do you think that Japan should remain primarily Japanese if that's what their will is? And they'll say, yeah, absolutely, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The majority of Muslims are not a problem. It's just a matter of, and the argument can be had, but it's a matter of, if you know that as a percentage of the whole, a higher concentration of Muslims are going to be violent or going to be rapists than is currently present in the United States. It's almost a fact, especially if you can't vet well, it's almost a fact that your percentage, like your crime per capita, is going to go up if you let those people into your country. And then it becomes a matter of, well, how much are you willing to let that happen? How much of it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that, like, if we're talking what the real talk on the people who are anti-immigration is, that's what that would be the best representation of their argument.
Yeah. Actually, I think that might be a more coherent representation.
Maybe.
Because I feel like at least a lot of the anti-immigration arguments are more. They're more, most of the people coming in from this country are going to be violent or going to cross.
Yeah.
And we don't.
Some of them are delusional like that.
Yeah, and I don't know if we know what the percentage is, and I'm not sure how we would find that out. Like what kind of study we could run to find out what percent of.
And that's the thing. I think that in Europe right now, you have a really great study in progress.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's peculiar, for instance, like that Sweden, which, and there's a multi-tiered argument going on right there, if there ever has been one. Like the argument starts, well, look how much rape, it's gone up 1,400% in the last decade. And it's like, well, they changed the definition of rape in 2004 to mean, if you touch someone's boob, that's considered rape. And then it's like, well, yeah, but they started that in 2004, and then, like, immigration started becoming prevalent here, and it still went up a lot between this year and this year. And that's a what is going on. And then there's the counter argument. Well, they don't allow you to report rape based on ethnicity in Sweden. And then you've got to wonder why that is, because that's a really anti-science stance to take as well. Mm-hmm. And it becomes this very multi-tiered argument. I don't know where it ends for me. Yeah. But I do think that it is an experiment in the progress nonetheless. And I'm really curious to see how it pans out for them.
Yeah. Now, I will say that I think one of the biggest differences between a lot of what's going on in Europe is the fact that, like, you hear about, these sections of towns or cities that are Sharia sections or whatever, mm-hmm. In Europe, and I think like that the biggest
Sharia,
yeah, and I think the biggest difference that we could, that would make us stronger, as long as we stop eroding the separation of church and state, is that, we don't, there is no, you don't have a legal right to start a town or start a section town where your law supersedes the law of the land.
It's interesting though. What if it was private property? Like, what if I owned I don't know, 80 acres, and I was like, I want my own laws to be put in place here. Of course, because I own all 80 right now. Anyone who comes here voluntarily and agrees to abide by these laws. I don't know. I think that would be. I don't know how I feel about that either. You know?
Yeah, that's true. I did hear. So recently there was a story about a church that's trying to create its own police force for its area. Like not a security force, not like mall cops, but like a police force. And because I think because it's a Christian church, it's kind of being ignored that they're doing this.
Interesting.
But it's one of those things that I don't think that anything like that should be allowed. Like, and I know it doesn't necessarily work, but the whole point of having the law be run by the government is that they're not supposed to be biased against one group or another. Like, that's whether it works or not. That is the purpose.
Can lock people up for, I don't know, for trespassing or something, and then that would be akin to kidnapping at some point.
Yeah. So it's interesting, but if as long as we stay, I feel like as long as we stay with this idea that you just don't get to do that, you don't get to show up and then let your religion dictate laws, will be okay. The problem, I think, is that a lot of the Christian right is kind of eroding that because they want special privileges to be able to do what they want without repercussions of the law.
Yeah, that specific church, I guess so. I don't know how prevalent that is, but yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
That's not cool.
Yeah, and not just that. There's other sort of smaller things. I think things like having. And I don't know when the last time this was pushed, but school districts and schools that try to push things like creationism in school. Like that's also eroding that kind of wall that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know how many Christians are on board with that. I haven't looked at the stats, but that's an area where I am like, no, that's not the job of public school to create or to carry on with that belief system. If you want to teach your children that, that's fine, but you have to do it at home or at church.
Yeah.
Not at public schools to advocate for that. That's insane.
Yeah. So who knows? But I feel like a lot of these little things that, God, I always want to call these microaggressions of the Christian right towards the wall of separation church and state. I do think that they do erode. Every time a parent tries to get away with not taking their kid to a hospital when they're sick and instead praying, and tries to get away with getting away with that act. Any one of those things slowly erodes that wall that we were trying to build to separate them.
See, that's a peculiar one because I believe in a person's right to not want to get vaccinated if they think it's going to give them autism. But as soon as you bring children into the mix, that becomes a real gray area. Yeah. Because on the one hand, I'm like, okay, that's a stupid reason not to get vaccinated. Your kids should get vaccinated. But on the other hand, if I say if the government takes so much control over children against the parents' will, how long is it going to be before the government makes an error?
Yeah.
And it's like, the parents should have been able to save the kid in that situation,
Mm-hmm. No, and that is true. There are a few things. Lately, a lot of the things that I'm referring to are things like parents who choose to pray for somebody who's got a kid who's got pneumonia or some shit, right?
Right.
And they choose to pray for them and not take them to the hospital, and the kid dies.
Right. And it's even worse when you know that the kid's on board with it because they've been indoctrinated into the same belief system as their parents.
Yeah.
Like you're doing it not only against the kids' will, not only against the parents' will, but the kids' will too. Mm-hmm. And that's like in that instance, I personally am like, yeah, it is in the kid's best interest to get the treatment they need anyway. But there's going to be instances where that's not the case.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a slippery slope argument, but there's validity to it,
Mm-hmm. No, it is hard to decide where one puts their foot down there and says, this is the spot where you're no longer, where the government is going to take away your responsibility about that, a kid, or even about yourself, because we do have some instances of that where,
like, why is euthanasia illegal? You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's becoming legal in some states. I think Oregon or Washington.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that.
I went to a talk like a year or so ago about it. And they talked about it's not called euthanasia, and it's not called.
Oh, of course, they have to soften the name, right?
Yeah, it's not suicide. It's like, what's it called? It's like end of life decision something. It's something really complicated. It sounds like it's not, but you pretty much I think Oregon has it, and you can pretty much, if you get two doctors to say that whatever, if you have an illness or whatever, that it is uncurable, and that the process to getting a cure will cause too much harm, and then you have to get like a psychologist to demonstrate that you're of sound mind or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then you do a bunch of legal mumbo jumbo, you can actually ask to end your life without anybody getting in trouble. Like it's entirely legal process. You can't get the doctors because they it's an actual doctorly prescribed method to end your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if there's no cure for it.
Yeah, so the doctors actually, it's the woman who talked about it described it as, they give you a pill that's an anesthetic and you fall asleep, and then they give you a second pill that actually ends your life.
See, that's the thing. Like, I feel like you shouldn't need to give anyone a reason to end your own life. But I mean, and I get why they're doing it. It's the utility argument. Like, well, there are people who exist right now who would have done that if it was legal, who are glad that they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I get.
Unfortunately, it's one of those decisions that it's not like you can reverse it. You can't change your mind about it later.
Right. That's right. Yeah. Okay, I want to be willed back into existence now. Yeah, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. So, but I mean, if nothing else, there are strives to make that more accessible and legal in places, because it's one of those things that you're right. You should be able to decide for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
to what degree you're willing to stay alive, and we often don't get to do that.
Yeah, the argument that I'd use to say that should be legal is the same argument that I would use to say that heroin should be legal.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a matter of heroin's good for you. Obviously, it's terrible for you. It's a matter of self-ownership and having agency over your actions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, we've been going for like 2 hours.
Oh, geez. Yeah, we have. Sorry, about 4:30 anyway.
Yeah. So I'm going to end it here.
That sounds like a good idea.
So anybody who is watching now or watches it later or whatever, go check out Max. And the link to him is in the video description, so you can go check out his channel. Like I said, he's not all about politics. He's got other videos about other things, but it sounds like you're going more into politics.
I try to be like 50%. Politics is really just to keep people's attention because it's relevant issues immediately. I more prefer philosophical stuff, but I might run out of that and start doing hit pieces more often. I don't know. I'm trying to kind of do both at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone watching this, if this is on my channel, check out Rhetoric and Discourse. He's got some awesome stuff on there. I remember seeing your something you did against Stefan Molyneux, and I have very mixed feelings about Stefan Molyneux.
Oh, I could go on all day about Stefan. Oh.
So could I. I like a lot of his stuff, and a lot of it is pure garbage. I'm like, how can you be so smart and so dumb at the same time? That's how I feel about it. But, check out Rhetoric and Discourse. It's amazing stuff too.
All right, y'all. Well, you all have yourselves a good night.
Yeah.